there, one kite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
What's the matter with that cat there?
Must be full of reefer.
Full of reefer?
Yeah, man.
You mean that cat's high?
Sailing.
Sailing?
Lightly.
We now wander off the beaten path with an update from the Reefer Reporter.
Hello and welcome to the Reefer Reporters. It's November the 5th, 2018, and we are live here at Lifestyle Radio. This week, Green Irene and myself, Al Graham, are at the news desk as we talk about and discuss the previous week's cannabis news. Hello, Irene. How are you?
Hey there, Al. I'm doing wonderfully. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Well, we got lots of news to cover. We're going to do some legalization news here from Canada. We got medical news, as well as we got news from the U.S., Mexico, as well as over in the U.K.
Yeah, we're really covering the globe this week, aren't we?
That's right. Yeah, we're doing some globe trotting. All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you want to get started with the first one straight up?
All right. We are going to start off with licensed cannabis growers have ties to organized crime, according to the article at CBC News.
Yes. Despite security checks by Health Canada, investors with mafia connections involved in legal production.
That's right. An investor in a major Canadian cannabis company has had long-standing ties, including business dealings with influential mafia members and drug traffickers, according to Radio Canada. Another investor in the same company has links with a prominent member of the Residos, the powerful Montreal crime family.
Yes, and then in still yet another case, an individual managed to sell his cannabis business to one of the big players in the industry, despite his connections to drug traffickers. In return, he received shares in the company and rented out space for a cannabis grow-up.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's legalization plan was supposed to cut out the organized crime, but an investigation by Radio Canada's on Cato shows Health Canada has granted production licenses to companies with individuals with links to the criminal underworld. On Cato examined hundreds of documents as part of its investigation, including reviews conducted by Canadian securities oversight bodies.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. For its part, Health Canada says it has not seen any cases of organized crime infiltration of more than the 130 licensed producers since 2013. To produce cannabis, those who hold certain positions in companies must obtain a permit from Health Canada by taking a security screening.
Right. Any past connections with individuals that are related to organized crime are part of the analyzed information. So, to secure a license, Health Canada first checks if the individual has a criminal record. Second, they go to the RCMP, consulting police databases to review information that may indicate an applicant's links to criminals. Health Canada makes its final decision with the information provided by the RCMP.
Yep. The RCMP says it has raised red flags on about 10% of the applicants so far since 2016, 2017. One of the spokesmen says it's real criminal associations who gives us the example of a person such as associated with individuals who have criminal records.
Right. So now I guess what they're saying there, the associated with individuals who have criminal records. So in other words, if your brother, let's say you had applied, Al, and your brother or your brother's dog, we're going to say, had some form of criminal record, that could affect you in your new job. The company you keep is being questioned here.
Yeah, I would think if the company you keep has a minor possession charges is one thing, but when it's connected to organized crime, then they want to know about that by the looks of it, and they won't allow you in.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of control mechanisms here. I mean, I realize, yeah, okay, shut up, Irene. There I go with my opinion again.
You go ahead, you give a little bit of opinion every once in a while, just don't get into a rant.
Well, it's saying Health Canada has found no evidence that organized crime has infiltrated any more than 130, in the 130 federally registered producers. Throughout the period in which Canada's cannabis industry was developing primarily for medical purposes, only individuals who directly ran the companies were required to obtain a security clearance. This approach, says the Conservative Senator Claude Carignan, demonstrates that, that a naivety about the workings of high-level organized crime.
Yeah.
If there was someone who has a criminal record, it's not that person they will put to apply for the license, he said. It would be completely naive to think that.
Yeah, well, last spring the Senate tried, but unsuccessfully, to amend Bill C-45 on the legalization of cannabis in order to demand more transparency from companies entering the industry. I believe that had to do, they wanted all the shareholders listed, publicly listed.
Yes.
And it would have been the only shareholders that would have to be publicly listed in any type of business, like fully listed.
Right, and in any other industry that has ever rolled out, that has never been necessary. So one's got to start asking those questions. But it's the article here that we were reading. It's not uncommon for cannabis companies to be funded through family trusts. And that's where I was going to go with that statement. Was it's not. It's one way in which to hide the individuals who have interests in a business.
Yeah.
The beneficiaries of a trust are not disclosed publicly.
No.
It's anonymous. It says, who is it that said this? Marie-Pierre Allard, who studies tax policy at the University in Sherbrooke. She adds that it's one of the great vulnerabilities of the Canadian legal system. It is, again, if they want to eliminate the mafia cannabis market, we cannot allow them to use tax havens or trusts to enter indirectly through the back door.
So they would have to ban that.
Yeah. So I mean, how they're going to do that, and how they think they're going to keep this underground market out. I mean.
Well, as the police spokesman says, technically there is nothing illegal here.
Right.
Obviously, the names are hidden, but by them doing it that way, that's not doing anything illegal.
Mm-mm. He says if there were to be new rules of transparency, all industries moving into Canada should be affected, she said. She acknowledged, however, that Health Canada is absolutely not equipped to conduct financial investigations. This is the traditional role, is to ensure a product meets certain standards. Health Canada's job is to make sure that when I eat cheese, it's cheese. When it's eggs, it's eggs. And when it comes to cannabis, it's cannabis.
That's right, yeah. Well, hopefully they do their job and somebody else does theirs.
Well, you can't have a fully bulletproof system, says Google.
No, it won't.
No.
And if they're already, if they're there now, they're there to stay unless they can turn around and, they would have to find out who's involved in those investors that nobody can see in the blind trust, and then they're not blind trust anymore. So,
yeah, there's the Ontario government or the Canadian government. I've been watching a lot of the different PSAs that have been coming out, the public service announcements, and a lot of these public service announcements, they say that the reason why Canada is legalizing cannabis is for the safety of its people. Well, for a long time through Prohibition, the propaganda suggested that cannabis was a gateway drug, as was discussed on Cannabis Conversations just this week, actually, with Council member Cher Cunningham. Cannabis itself is not the gateway drug. It's the fact that you had to go to an illegal source to obtain it is what made it illegal, is what made it a gateway drug. Because, of course, while you're there, you're subject to a lot of other influences.
You can be.
Yeah, but the cannabis itself is not an addictive substance, not any more than gambling is. So in other words, it's a behavior. So what is the safety precautions that they're worried about?
They say there's 9% of the people who consume cannabis get addicted, and I think the gambling number is higher.
Sure. But I mean, it's not a physical addiction. It's a psychological addiction. Unlike alcohol or tobacco, both of which are chemical addictions.
These are habituatory. All right, let's move on to our next article.
Sure.
All right, and this one is from Canadian Lawyer. First Nations say land title gives rights to cannabis use and sales.
Yes. The First Nations officials say that overarching federal and provincial frameworks in place to regulate cannabis in Canada do not consider the third level of governance that comes from the rights they already have over traditional lands. The Cannabis Act effectively splits jurisdiction over cannabis retailing and use into two camps: licensing of medical cannabis outlets, cultivation and production through Health Canada regulations, while licensing of recreational retail outlets and personal use falls under provincial statutes.
Indigenous people say that they have historic rights attached to their traditional lands, have achieved rights through court cases, have treaty processes in progress or provincial agreements outside the treaty process, and they are using a federal granted land management tool known as land codes.
Well, Chief Bob Chamberlain says the reality is there was law first and not always the authority. He was, along with Chief Harvey McLeod and Cheryl Casimir, have spearheaded the BC Assembly of First Nations joint interim working group on cannabis that is looking at issues such as jurisdiction, but also taxation, a major concern for First Nations who want revenue sharing on cannabis and see millions of dollars of revenue bypassing them.
This is how, for example, down in Tioga, helping big time. There's reports in the newspapers about how now people are finishing their houses, they're getting lawns even, improved vehicles, and people are working. People have jobs now, and there's income within the community for a better quality of life.
Absolutely. The economic boost from a new industry, never mind an industry that has such an amazing crop with such versatility as far as products and development. And again, it's just a tremendous economic boost to any area or municipality, town, country that embraces it. I think, just common sense is required here. And we're dealing with government.
Yeah. Yeah, well, back in the spring, the National Assembly of First Nations passed a resolution urging the federal government to prevent provincial legislation from applying to First Nations lands, and have also urged revenue sharing. That hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Neither one of those has happened yet, and this is where they should be involved, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, spokesperson Colin Hines says licensees must first clear a BC government background check, and then the applicant needs the consent of the First Nation governing authority for those lands before the BC government will issue a license. BC Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General Mike Farnworth said that he estimates it'll take 2 to 3 years before BC has a mature cannabis system in place that will have dealt with all the issues surrounding both medical and non-medical use of cannabis. So neither of these people even responded to the fact that revenue sharing hasn't been defined.
Yeah, exactly.
So they both said a lot of words without giving any
answers.
Yeah. Well, typical politics, right?
Well, according to one spokesperson, they say that medical or cannabis is dealt with on First Nations lands will be determined by entitlement. Jurisdiction flows from title, adding that they add that even applies to lands that are unceded, as there is a presumption of First Nations rights. Once there is jurisdiction, there are laws. Some First Nations groups are moving to forge their own laws.
Chamberlain says that there's going to be several examples across Canada and in BC. In eastern Canada, Six Nations, the largest First Nations reserve in Canada, is writing its own legislation. In BC, the Quaqua Applet First Nation, which is a Fraser Valley group, voted in a land code in April 2018, which was one of 80 across Canada now in operation. Under the code, Quaqua Appellate Council passed a cannabis law allowing a medical marijuana or cannabis outlet to operate under its land code.
The Federal First Nations Land Management Act, which came in effect in 1999, allows First Nations to opt out of 32 sections of the Indian Act relating to land management and develop their own lands for reserved lands in a land code. It draws its power from the 1996 Framework Agreement on First Nations Land Management, setting out the rights to develop laws.
Yeah, the code deals with land management, the environment, natural resources, and economic development opportunities within the land management powers. If anything I have learned from in the last few weeks of reading loads and loads of government garble, everything they say is very ambiguous. They're not giving any answers.
No, they won't give you an exact answer.
No. The managing partner of Ratcliffe and Company, Greg McDade, which is a law firm, who specializes in First Nation issues and has forged several of the land codes, says he cannot comment on the code's relevance to cannabis laws, but he says the land codes have become a powerful tool for First Nations. Be curious to hear Tim's viewpoint on that.
Yes, it would be. It would be. I have to share this article if I already haven't.
Well, I'm hoping to have Tim on the show. Actually, Tim's on the show this week on Cannabis Conversations, so he'll be playing next week.
There you go.
Yes, I'm formulating my questions to ask him as we go.
Yeah, well, your request has been granted, obviously.
Yes, it's going to be wonderful to chat with him. I'm looking very forward to it. Carry on here. Yeah.
Yep. In April, the Quaqua Applet group passed its land code, and in the summer, the RCMP raided an indigenous Bloom unlicensed medical cannabis dispensary on the land. A day later, it was up and running. Robert Lowy, he's a chairman for the indigenous Bloom, issued a statement to Global News saying that the RCMP unfortunately did not know that Quaqua Applet had the third and final reading of their cannabis law the same day as the closure. They reopened the dispensary operations the next day with the guidance of the new implemented law. Yeah, actually, I think he's going to be a guest on the Pace Radio show shortly.
Yeah.
Have to find out more. Keep going.
Louis, a former practicing lawyer specializing in the native law, chairs the Land Advisory Board that was established through that framework agreement that advises members in 3 Canadian regions on land governance over reserve lands, management, and resources. Louis declined an interview, not surprisingly. Yeah. Andre Gagnon, spokesman for Health Canada, said in an email that Health Canada recognizes the rights of First Nations to bring in laws on their lands as the nations move towards self-determination. Such bylaws or legislations enacted by Indigenous governments could coexist with the Cannabis Act as long as they do not conflict with the Act or frustrate its purpose, he said. This must also be balanced against the need to ensure that the legal and regulatory framework for cannabis, including criminal prohibition, is applied consistently across the country. As such, the Cannabis Act, like the Criminal Code, is a federal law of general application that will apply to all people in Canada, including Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, he says that those First Nations wishing to produce and sell cannabis are still required to be licensed by the appropriate provincial, territorial, and federal authorities. Well, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah,
what's going to happen down the road, because we're not hearing about any raids on any of these locations.
Well, just that one that opened the very next day in Quaqua there. So, yeah.
But, you can see some reserves, like there's one over there in Alderville. They call it the Green Mile, because it's just a mile along with dispensaries in different locations as you go along. Yeah.
Sorry.
So
that just brought a smile to my face. I could just imagine it.
Yeah, like, are they gonna go after the ones in the big cities and all that, and then are they gonna focus their way towards the reserves afterwards, or are they gonna hopefully come up with some type of negotiations? I think this is gonna be a battle for some time.
I do as well. You know, this article goes on to say that Cheam, which is another First Nation with a land code, Council member Andrew Victor says that his First Nation currently has a cannabis control law under construction, but the law will align with laws currently in place, and the land codes are an effective tool for management. Land codes are a whole new realm of what First Nations are able to do and for the day-to-day management, he says. Yeah. Victor says there's now a BC president in court, although provincial court, of land codes laws that are being upheld and flowing from a federal statute on land management. Do you know, is it just me, or does your head spin too whenever you start talking politics?
Yeah, my head spins too. But we can see that they are challenging this. They are coming up with their own laws. They are going along in a self-governance way, and all we can do is stay tuned and watch what happens.
Yeah. I mean, they've got to work with, of course, we all have to work together. It's about teamwork. Yeah. But the Indigenous rights and the rights to self-governance, and especially when it comes to something that, a substance such as cannabis, that is in there. I mean, there is a tribe over in the U.S., or, you know, south of our Canadian border anyway, that their name, when directly translated, means hemp grower or growers of hemp.
Well, there you go. That's,
this is part of their heritage.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the next one.
All righty.
The future of legal cannabis. Canadian greenhouses could mean cheaper and safer cannabis. Now, I can see cheaper. I don't know about safer, but I can understand cheaper.
Yeah.
If those savings are passed on.
Well, this is it. It says this was in Delta, BC. The red leaf blueberry bushes and greenhouses filled with tomatoes tell you that the small town south of Vancouver is a great place to grow things. Peculiar smell in the air tells you that marijuana producers have already figured that out.
That's right. Across Canada, gleaming glass greenhouses that grew produce for consumers are being retrofitted with air filters and light-blocking shades. Gone are the tomato plants and peppers. In their place are tens of thousands of sun-grown cannabis plants and hundreds of farm workers transplanting, watering, trimming, and packaging pot.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of jobs.
Wow. Yeah. And the article just completely disappeared on me, my friend.
Did it?
I can't. Yeah.
You can't even help me out. Okay.
I can't. I'm sorry. We went to commercial real estate somehow. Some of these websites, they've got a lot of marketing on them, and you click the wrong button and away it goes.
Okay.
I'll see if I can pull it back up, but you go ahead.
Okay. Experts say that the highly sophisticated operations are the future of cannabis production internationally, and they hope that this will drive the price of cannabis so low black marketers give up. Now, they would have to really drive that price down. I don't know. What they say, Rob Hill of Emerald Health Therapeutics, he says, we haven't changed the footprint. We've just changed the crop. Canada became the second and largest nation to legalize cannabis on October 17th. The country's legal cannabis system requires that cannabis be grown indoors by licensed providers. So Emerald Health Therapeutics partnered with the longtime producer Sun Farms, Pure Sun Farms, which is capable of producing a staggering 82 tons of cannabis annually from their 1 million square foot greenhouse complex. That is a lot.
How big was that? How big was that? Sorry, could you read that back to me? I missed that.
Okay, it is a 1.1 million square foot greenhouse complex.
Wow.
Produce 82 tons annually.
Wow.
Yeah. And they go on to say that Canada's decision to legalize and regulate cannabis sales is widely watched globally by governments, regulators, and cannabis investors, who claims the nation's precedent-setting move could herald broader acceptance of legal cannabis, particularly in the United States. Which is true. Everybody around starts acting on this, and the federally down there in the U.S., they just sit on things. I don't know. They're going to be way behind.
That's right. Well, okay. I see where I...
Did you find the article?
Well, I did, but it keeps blocking me out because it wants me to take a survey.
Oh, yes. Yeah, rejected. At the bottom it says rejected.
I got through it. There we are. Look at this. All right, hey, look at me.
They say that the price of cannabis reflects the reality that it largely remains on boutique cropped, often grown under extensive electric lights in warehouses. Illegal growers may also cut corners by growing outside on remote federal land. Because they mentioned here $600 a pound. I don't know, Irene, you ever see $600 a pound? The business of cannabis is a prime motivator. Today, wholesale cannabis sells for about $600 a pound in some U.S. states.
Wow, you know what? And yeah, it goes on to say, and 3 years ago, cannabis was selling for $2,000 a pound.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the going rate is right now. It's not something I pay a lot of attention to in any market. I know that the OCS rolled it out at a ridiculous price tag, ranging from $7 and change right up to $15 per gram. Well, I don't know how many grams are there in a pound. 30 grams in an ounce, 16 ounces in a pound.
It's 454.
454. Well, 454 even at $10 is 4,000, correct?
That's
Did I do my math right? Hey,
well, just so you know, in Colorado, the prices dropped from $7 a gram to $4.19.
The price was always set based on risk.
Correct.
Yeah. Pardon me.
Yeah, it happens.
Cannabis,
the price was always set, exactly. It was always set based on risk, according to the CEO of Green Solutions, Kyle Spendell. And I have to agree. There was a story years ago when Canada first came out with medical cannabis. That's what the government did. They sent people out to find out what it was worth on the street, instead of finding out what it actually cost to produce. And now we're seeing it for a buck or two. A licensed producer can produce it for $1 or $2, and they're still charging big bucks.
They're still charging illegal street prices. And
Correct.
Why? Because they can. See, one of the reasons, of course, it would have been marked up back in the day is simply because of the risk you were taking illegally, against the legal.
Yeah. Well,
and so $10 a gram for something that only cost, less than $1 to produce was a pretty good markup, made the illegal activity worth the risk, I guess, to some.
Yeah, the fellow there from Green Solutions, which is actually a 17-store company, he said when they first started in this, it was $5,000 a pound 4 years ago.
Wow, eh? Well, yeah. An increasing number of U.S. states have legalized cannabis. Growers are getting more comfortable, and they're starting to scale up their operations. Indoor growers of both legal and black market cannabis consumed 4.1 million megawatt hours of electricity last year. That's roughly equal to the total electricity generated annually by the Hoover Dam.
Wow, that's a lot of power. The company said electricity costs make about 20% of the indoor growing prices, compared to 8% for outdoor.
Yeah, so there's a definite savings if you can get it outdoors. But while growing outdoors is cheaper, it does limit the number of crops growers can harvest in a year. Growing in greenhouses, however, reduces both electricity costs and the amount of water and pesticides needed for growing outdoors. It also allows growers to maintain crops year-round in the right climate.
Yeah, well, they, according to Carson Humiston, who is with Banks. They're in Santa Monica, California. He says, we're seeing a shift away from people who were effectively hobby growers.
Yes.
He believes it's going to be big agricultural.
Yeah, he says it's definitely where the industry is shifting for them. What's the difference in growing lettuce, tomatoes, or cannabis? And you know, we've all said it. Any one of us who have ever grown a cannabis plant says the same thing. Humister's company, Banks, has grown rapidly by providing part-time workers to large-scale cannabis farmers. Each of their 600 temporary laborers is background checked, carries workers' compensation insurance, and is banned from consuming on the job. It's all part of the industry's move away from the days when cannabis farmers and trimmers got high while working and, you know, had no legal recourse if they got hurt on the job.
Yeah. Well, now it's coming under, you know, regulation and control, so those things start coming into you know, play here.
Yeah, they're no longer, you know, the workers aren't paid in cash or poundage of product anymore.
No.
They're just not. Now it's back to being about the almighty dollar. Thank you, legalization. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Well, according to inside the Pure Sun Farms vault that holds more than 2 tons of processed cannabis, that's awaiting distribution to government-sanctioned stores. Current prices in Canada, that's $20 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And they plan to harvest similar crops more than 80 times a year.
That is just incredible. The only guys who are going to be able to play in the game are the larger ones because they have the economies of scale. They just do. And this is what Matt Crames, a cannabis analyst and founder of Green Wave Advisors in New York City, was saying. It really doesn't bode well for the small guy.
Craft growers.
Pray for them.
Pray for them.
And you know, we have to have a voice. It really is time that Canadians take off the sheepskin and stand up, get involved in your community municipal conversations. Be there at those meetings. Say what you mean what you say, and stand up. Be convicting when it comes to cannabis. Have a conviction. It's time. It really is time for a revolt. I don't know if that's the right word to use. I'm not even sure I really want to use that revolt, you know, for what it means to me. But it's time we stand up and stop listening to all the gun flapping that our government serves us. Sorry, sidetracked. There I go.
Sidetracked. All right, let's just move on then.
Let's do that.
Okay, let's move on here to another law article, actually. Law Times, from the Law Times. Familiarity with retail cannabis rules is needed.
Yeah, this came out on the 5th. And, you know, October 17th has come and gone. Recreational cannabis is now legal across Canada, and demand spiked instantly. The OCS, Ontario Cannabis Store, for example, says it received about 100,000 online orders within the first 24 hours of becoming legal. 12,000 of those orders were placed within the first hour of legalization.
Yes, big numbers. The Federal Cannabis Act, which came into force, as we know, in October, well, it's 3 weeks, not quite a month yet. It left key aspects of regulation of the provinces and territories. Specifically, provinces and territories are each responsible for developing systems for the distribution and sale of the recreational cannabis, as well as developing restrictions on the consumption of it in their respective jurisdiction areas. Just go to small words.
Yes. On the very same day that recreational cannabis was legalized on a federal level, Ontario's Bill 36, the Cannabis Statute Law Amendment Act of 2018, received the royal assent and changed previously established regulations on the consumption of cannabis at the 11th hour. This meant that lawyers specializing in cannabis and otherwise needed to become refamiliarized with a brand new regime. Immediately, lawyers impacted by cannabis legalization in a multitude of areas needed to consider what impact the change had on clients' business plans and how to advise their clients to change and adapt to the new legislation.
Yeah, beginning in April 1st, 2019, Ontario will see private-run stores sell cannabis and cannabis accessories under strict regulation from the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. The AGCO will be evaluating and granting applications to retail operator hopefuls until the brick-and-mortar retail stores are up and running. All legal sales are done through the OCS stores. I've talked to a few people who are interested in those, wanting to apply for a license.
Well, the I happen to know just because I've done a couple of shows recently with a couple of new council members, and so I've done a little bit of studying. And the AGCO, so the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, they won't even be receiving or accepting applications until the start of December, which I can't remember. It's somewhere between the 1st or the 3rd, I believe it is, of December, before they're accepting those applications. Now, the municipalities that were unfamiliar with legalization or the smaller towns that, still have that stigma attached, the social stigma attached, or still maintain an archaic attitude that we're considering opting out. This isn't even an option. I mean, the reality is that it's so ambiguous. Again, I state, red herring, people. It's not the question as to whether to opt in or opt out. The bottom line is retail cannabis is already legal in your community. What you are deciding is whether or not you may or may not want down the road a brick and mortar location, a store on the main street in the retail sector. So
they're shocked about that. I can tell you, they're shocked about the outdoor public consumption too.
Well, they are, and it's right in line. So what starts happening at public events, family events, municipal events? There's a lot of anxiety over this. There's a lot of questions, concerns, curiosities, and I think the next 3 to 6 months are going to be quite interesting. Our municipal governments have, for all intent and purposes, if you or I applied for a retail license to AGCO, which is the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, if we applied for our licenses and we had the spot downtown, make sure that it's in the retail sector of downtown, not in anything historic. Don't give them any reason to defy you on it. And everything's in order and you get granted that license, the municipality has no choice in that. They have to allow you to open up your retail business. They cannot say or prevent you purely on moral or personal differences.
Yeah, they have to let the provincial government know by a certain time.
They have 15 days from the date of the acceptance of that application.
Yeah, but the municipalities have until January 22nd to decide whether they want to opt out or not.
Right.
That's
kind of a mute. Yeah, it's a very mute. Opting in, opting out. It's just silliness. Opting in or opting out. What are you opting out? There's nothing definitive to opt in or opt out of. The bottom line is retail is coming. Now it's whether or not, for example, if my municipality, my council said, no, we don't want a cannabis brick and mortar store on our downtown street, on our main street, then the AGCO, the Alcohol Gaming Commission of Ontario, will not accept any applications for any stores going in down there. But that's about the only thing opt-in, opt-out means. That's about all the level of control our municipal government actually has.
Well, if your municipal, we're getting way off topic here, but if your municipal government says that they don't want any stores in their area, you're saying they don't have that choice?
No, I'm
Even
saying
though
they do. At that point, the Alcohol Gaming Commission of Ontario would deny or refuse to even look at any business proposals for licensing a place, say, in Penetanguishene or to Misconneaughey.
If it had opted out, yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. But
okay.
if you're, So, let's get back to where we were. So
correct.
I'm sure the general public is anxious for the application processes to get started. Last week, the Ontario Ombudsman confirmed that his office had received more than 1,000 complaints from customers frustrated with slow delivery times, poor customer service, and unexplained changes or cancellations to their orders from the OCS.
Yes, lots of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bill 36 amended and renamed a bunch of different things within the Cannabis Act within our province, and I'm not going to go through them all here. But it also created a new Smoke-Free Ontario Act, and this is where Ontario can now consume cannabis in many outdoor public places, including sidewalks, parks, certain designated guest rooms in hotels, motels and inns, residential vehicles, and boats that meet certain criteria, and if certain prescribed requirements are met in controlled areas in certain long-term care homes, retirement homes, and supporting residences.
Yes. For all intent purposes, cannabis is now permitted in any location where smoking tobacco is allowed.
Yeah.
And this change has come as a shock to many city councillors and a lot of the people of the municipalities. The province has given municipalities options to enact bylaws to set rules beyond the provincially set minimum standard. Many municipalities have been immediately responsive to the consumption issue, and many have already begun to establish bylaws to control the consumption.
Geez, I've walked the street with many people who are consuming cannabis, and I've never seen any problem.
No, and I don't think we're really going to see the problem like we saw it once before, like a lot of people think we were going to see it. Now, aroma is going to be an issue. There's going to be a bitching complaint somewhere along the line because that's human nature. But the reality is, I suspect that the aroma or the offense of another human being enjoying a cannabis cigarette in public where they're perfectly legal and allowed to do so is going to more or less smooth over, I'd say, 3 to 6 months. Just like, do you remember back when Green Earth became a really big thing, and they were enacting a law that don't idle your cars, and everybody was calling in on their neighbor. Oh, their car's idling. I think it's been out there a little bit longer than it should have been. It shouldn't be on that long. And municipalities and police departments were swarmed with these calls of all these people complaining about their neighbor running their car for too long. Inside of 6 months, that all passed away. It became, people just didn't idle their cars anymore. I think cannabis consumption, although different, is going to be quite similar. For the first little bit, you might get the odd look of, as if they're smoking cannabis right there. Well, as if they're standing outside of the bank, as if they're standing outside of the restaurant. Well, thank God they're standing outside the restaurant, because up until now they couldn't even go in the restaurant to have a meal because they need that cannabis in order to digest properly or whatever. The point is you can have it wherever tobacco smoke can be done. So coming back, instead of digressing and going off topic, municipalities, again, have some power to prohibit the presence of retail stores by passing a special resolution before the 22nd. The municipalities may take advantage of the opt-out of the cannabis retail framework. The catch, the municipal opt-out is a one-time only offer. If municipalities either miss the deadline or opt in to the cannabis retail framework, they will not get another chance to opt out. So you have to be very, very, very firm that you do not want to have a brick and mortar store in your municipality, and you better make sure that your tax-paying citizens are in agreement. I mean, transparency and communication with your community, with the public, is going to be essential for new municipal
Well, the one thing it won't stop cannabis from being within their community. So, all right, Irene, let's take a medication break.
Sure.
Okay. Today, as we take our break, our listeners will hear a bit of some U.S. coverage of cannabis legalization. First up, coverage by NBC. And then you'll also know we're coming back when you hear about some sunshine in a bag. You're listening to the Reefer Reports. We're live here at lifestyleradio.net and our sister site, 420radio.ca.
3, 2, 1. In Canada, high excitement. Recreational marijuana is legal. Hugo Senecal got here at 4 a.m. to be the first one in.
It's a really big day for a stoner like me. It's a big thing.
A self-described stoner.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'm a professional stoner.
Buyers have to be 18 years old and can only take home 30 grams. There aren't many stores, so the lines grew extra long. The rest of the business is done on a government-run website.
We know that we're going to make it more difficult for young people to access it. We're going to remove the profits from the pockets of criminal organizations.
The U.S. Border Patrol says it will be inspecting closely. Right now, there are 9 states that have legalized recreational pot, and 31 allow medical marijuana. Industry leaders are concerned about losing their edge to Canada.
This is a tremendous opportunity that the United States is missing out on.
But there are those who agree with Attorney General Jeff Sessions' hardline approach.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana and you can just go down to the corner grocery store and get it. Give me a break.
Now that Canada has taken the leap, the world will be watching its smoke signals. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Montreal.
Are you looking for cannabis news, education, and people's opinions? Are you looking to learn what Canadian and international cannabis advocates are doing, not only now, but what got them to this point in their lives, and what does the future hold for them? Do you want to learn how patients are using cannabis as their daily medication, or learn how their cannabis use helps them with their medical condition? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I'm going to suggest to you to tune in to Lifestyle Radio. Catch their live weekly shows and have your questions and concerns answered and find the experience you're looking for. Monday, catch your weekly news broadcast with the Reefer Reporters. Then on Wednesday, get several hours worth of cannabis public education. We get things started with Cannabis and Coffee with Marijuana. Finish up your evening with the award-winning Pace Radio Show with Al Graham and joint host Kim Cooper and Alicia Yashishin. No week would be complete without tuning into Friday night's program, the 420 Radio Show featuring Al Rapp and the 420 Radio crew, Mary Jane Baker and Marcel Gignac. Cannabis is a lifestyle, and you can catch all your cannabis lifestyle information right here at lifestyleradio.net or at our sister site, 420radio.ca. Tune in to DJ Passion from the land of Ganja, the island of Jamaica, when he comes to you live every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on lifestyleradio.net. Listen in until midnight every weekend as he spins your favorite reggae tunes, including the classics, from Butterfly's Passion, Bed and Breakfast Above Discovery Bay. DJ Passion makes you feel like you are on the island. Head to the land of sun, fun, and Ganja weekly when you tune in Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to Reggae Saturday with DJ Passion, live here on lifestyleradio.net.
I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, not for long. The future is coming on. Hey, laughing. I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, not for long. My future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on.
Okay, we're back. We got some medication into us. Got reloaded for the next break. Green Irene, we have a very busy day, so I think it's best we get back at her. What do you think?
Oh, I'm in for that, Jess.
All right. What's up next?
Next up, we've got Fire and Flower that's set to open wholesale cannabis operation in Saskatoon.
Do they have any cannabis?
Yeah, this is an Edmonton-based wholesale cannabis operation that's expected to begin operating this month from an undisclosed location in Saskatoon's industrial area.
Yes, secrets. Shh, don't tell anybody where it is. All right, the Edmonton-based Fire and Flower is readying its storage facility and has applied for a license to operate a wholesale cannabis operation. Many of the cannabis retail outlets in Saskatchewan, including all 7 in Saskatoon, have yet to open. Many have cited a lack of supply.
Yeah, they say, we're very close, but we're not open yet, says Myson in a phone interview last week from Edmonton. We hope we'll be able to fill some of the market. We don't know that we will be able to fill all of the market. He went on to say that the outlet is expected to open in a couple of weeks, and the structure for the cannabis market in Saskatchewan is different than in any of the other provinces because of its wholesale component.
Well, the SLGA regulates the private sector wholesale and retail components, according to the spokesman David Morris. Retailers can purchase cannabis from federally licensed producers or licensed wholesalers, which must have a physical warehouse within the province.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah, wholesalers. We don't have that here in Ontario. We just have the one. Yeah, go ahead.
No, we don't allow that right now. But it's very exciting. Saskatchewan, someplace to keep an eye on for sure. Because they don't have to locate in specific communities. Unlike the lottery system that's awarded the province 51 cannabis retail licenses, including 7 in Saskatoon, there are no restrictions on the number of wholesale permits. Only one wholesale license in the province has been granted to a company called Running Leaf that was established this year.
Yeah, their officials declined to reveal the location of the warehouse in an interview this month, citing security concerns. 9 other companies have applied for a wholesale license.
Yeah, there's 20 federally licensed cannabis producers that are registered in the province as well, he added. Applicants for a wholesale license are judged to confirm the proposed facilities and personnel involved are suitable for the operation of cannabis warehouse and distribution business. Information required includes things like criminal history, financial history, and other personal and corporate information.
Now, according to the government's website, potential wholesale operators must show good character, storage, and transportation security, and capacity to track and report inventory and sales. The permit fee is $5,000, including $2,000 a non-refundable application fee.
Money, money, money. Unlike the eye-popping $20,000 annual business license that's required for cannabis retail stores in Saskatoon, the City of Saskatoon fee for a cannabis wholesale operation is the same as for most other businesses, $125. 2 such business licenses have been approved, including one for Fire and Flower.
Yeah, well, Fire and Flower is not limited to wholesale in Saskatchewan. The company's has won chances at North Battleford as well as Yorkton.
There. Well, in addition to the 2 stores that are up and running and selling cannabis in Saskatchewan, Fire and Flower has opened 10 other stores in Alberta. The company aims to open 47 stores in Western Canada. The owner says, "We would love to be in Regina and Saskatoon." He said, "We're excited about the opportunity there in Saskatchewan."
Yeah, well, time will tell if they get some cannabis.
Yes. Well, of the 7 groups that won the lottery to operate retail outlets in Saskatoon, only 3 have established locations and none have opened for business. Stores are expected to open this month on 3rd Avenue downtown, just off 8th Street, on Grosvenor Avenue, and on 20th Street West in Riversdale.
Well, I don't know how long until they're going to have any cannabis, but our next story touches on the medical cannabis and how the users are anxious over the supply shortages.
Yes.
As we just said in the last story, they're waiting for cannabis to open the store. We got patients that are waiting for their medicine.
And this is exactly what patients were afraid of, and it is becoming something of a health crisis now, says one advocate. Canadians who use cannabis for medical reasons are being hit by these shortages in a far worse way. It's actually more than a supply issue because really it's something of a health crisis now, says James O'Hara of the advocacy group for Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Marijuana. O'Hara says Canadians with cannabis prescriptions to help with seizures, anxiety, and other serious health problems are emailing the organization because they're upset by the out-of-stock signs at the regular provider's website or retail location. As you know, I service I work with a lot of different clients and patients, and they're all getting letters from companies like CanTrust that are saying, that we have a new president, we're sorry for this inconvenience. Well, could you imagine if a pharmacist all of a sudden said, sorry, I don't have your insulin this week. You'll have to wait till next week, to a diabetic that was dependent on it. And this is what's happening with cannabis. Many of us patients have learned to modify and control whatever health issue it is that we're dealing with through cannabinoid therapy, and now our strains aren't available, the THC levels, the cannabinoid profile. It's frightening. And unfortunately, there are no regulations in place to actually guarantee a supply for the medical market.
Brian Wakefield of Thunder Bay has been unable to place an order for 3 weeks. He uses his cannabis to manage his ADHD and borderline personality disorder. He says, I've been on the phone today trying to figure out which licensed producer I can switch to. I'm a patient. It's not like I'm ordering a microphone off of Amazon, and I'm upset because I got the wrong color. No, he's looking for his medicine. Well,
this fella here in Kitchener, Dan Goulet of Kitchener, Ontario, he works for a cannabis producer, and even he can't get his medicine. Yeah. My company doesn't have the CBD oil that I use. So there I'm talking. So once again, that brings us back to, the CBD strains and profiles, cannabinoid profiles. In the 2 weeks that he's been unable to access cannabis supplies, he's been experiencing bad health effects from a digestive disorder. Meanwhile, there's a 67-year-old Peter Prett of Thunder Bay. He's glad he was warned ahead of time to prepare for a shortage. A friend who works for a large cannabis producer said that and whose name that he declined to name, tipped him off that the focus would be on shifting to the recreational market and that he should stock up.
Yeah, but who can pay their patients? The patients, most of them don't have money to stock up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Many medical users suspect that the licensed producers have been seduced by the much larger recreational market and have prioritized shipments to that sector. The director of Cannabis Council of Canada, which represents 85% of the country's cultivators and medical suppliers, says the opposite is true.
Oh, please save me the BS.
If anything, we're seeing adult consumer use cannabis being repackaged and relocated to ensure medical demand is met first, is what they claim.
He also acknowledges that there are issues right now. Every time a patient is waiting, that's a problem. Well, Big Whoop, what are you doing about the problem? REWAC says that a combination of factors have led to difficulties. Yeah. Demand for medicinal cannabis skyrocketed prior to October 17th, possibly because of concerns from users that recreational users would deplete the inventory, and those orders depleted the medical inventory. Do you believe this?
No.
Yeah.
Despite the assurances of some providers that they will put their medical cannabis users first, some doubt it. No one's really communicating with patients and saying, hey, look, in 12 weeks or 6 weeks or 3 weeks, we're going to be fine. That contributes to the anxiety that patients have because they're now in a realm where they just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, and that's so true.
That's according to Mr. Wakefield.
Yes. They're not being very transparent, he said. There's no solutions are coming from the LPs, which are licensed producers. No one is saying this is what we're going to do to impress this. He's also not impressed with the government's treatment of medical patients. Health Canada is very hands-off with this, and that's frustrating. In an email, go ahead.
Yeah, it would be. In an email, the CBC, a spokesman for Health Canada, said that at the end of September 2018, licensed producer reported that they had an inventory of more than 90,000 kilograms of dried cannabis and 41 liters of oil. In contrast, primary estimates of retail sales to date with publicly available information, while strong, represents only a small fraction of that available inventory, according to the agency.
Well, if that's the case, trouble experienced by many medical patients is going to remain a mystery. O'Hara goes on to say, we never had any complaints about delivery before legalization. What's changed? Just one thing.
Yeah, just one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
That's legalization, for the recreational market.
Let's go on to another story involving
some other
medical
challenges.
cannabis. Yeah, that's right. And this is something that has been people very concerned. And here we go. A Victoria medical cannabis user challenges cannabis-related driving infractions in court.
Yes, a Victoria man received a 24-hour license suspension for drug-impaired driving and a fine for possession of cannabis in a motor vehicle, according to Sarah Lehman, who is a partner at Lehman Rudett Law Group and a criminal defense lawyer who specializes in impaired driving. The man retained Lehman's firm to dispute the pair of infractions stemming from a routine traffic stop conducted by the Victoria Police on the 26th of October. Lehman predicts that the situation will only become more common in post-legalization Canada, making this particular case a potential early indicator of how a brand new legal environment will shake out.
Yeah, it's important for us to get some clarity on this and for us to understand how these laws are going to be applied and interpreted, Lehman says. The man asked the lawyers to speak on their behalf, so the guy's name's not going to be released. But according to the firm, the client told the officer during the traffic stop that he had not used drugs or alcohol that day, and it's a claim he still maintains. But he has nevertheless asked to step out of the vehicle, and after identifying himself as a federally licensed medical cannabis user, a field sobriety test was issued by the officer who concluded the man was impaired.
God. And this is where all that prejudice is going to start in. The man obtained a medical cannabis license in the first place because he found cannabis to be an effective treatment for pain and mobility issues associated with the rare arthritic spinal condition that he was dealing with. It's these mobility issues, the man suggested to his lawyer, that may have influenced the officer to erroneously conclude that he was impaired.
So the person's got an arthritic spinal condition.
Yeah.
And they expect them to be able to walk a straight line.
Yeah. And as most of us know, the standardized field sobriety test, actually the RCMP spells it out here, consists of an eye examination, a walk and turn test, and one leg stand. So, of course, if you're dealing with arthritis or a spinal condition, never mind an arthritic spinal condition, you're not going to be able to perform those tests as required. Yeah.
Well, a spokesman says that a number of questions accompany these tests. One of those, he said, asks whether an individual has a medical condition that could affect their ability to complete the test. The Victoria Police Department was unable to respond immediately to the rest of the man's claims.
Well, Osako suggested that there was very little they could offer by way of comment as the matter was being brought before the courts. Lehman said her colleagues were in the process of filing a petition for judicial review as she spoke. As for the 24-hour suspension of alcohol-impaired driving can be resolved through an ICBC adjuster. There's no such avenue to dispute a 24-hour drug-impaired driving suspension. So instead, such disputes can only be addressed by filing a petition for judicial review in the BC Supreme Court.
Yeah, they say that's something that the government might want to review in the future and determine whether or not they should be having an administrative review process for these kinds of offenses, they say. The other infraction the guy was charged with was cannabis possession, stems from what the man contends the officer told him was cannabis residue on the dashboard of his vehicle?
Wow. And apparently this is completely unrelated to any other amount of cannabis being found on the person or in his car. BC's Cannabis Control Licensing Act treats transporting cannabis by car in much the same way as alcohol. Open containers must not be accessible to the driver or passengers, and those containers that are within reach must be unopened and in their original packaging. But Lehman said her firm's client disputes that both that he had broken these laws, and that there was any kind of residue on his dashboard. So basically, the cop saying he had it right there on his dashboard, and he's saying I didn't even have it there. And no
residue. Like, is this from maybe rolling a joint there and there was a little bit laying there? Was it some trichomes there? I don't know. Maybe there was a little bit of oil from running off the edge of his paper on it. I don't know. It just seems...
Well, in that case, I'm going to be charged because I'm sure it's in my slippers and my socks and,
in the bottom
on
of your
my
purse.
Sweater and in my hair. And
Now, incidentally, there's no police report on the incident, which is currently available. While the man's medical license entitles him to possession of cannabis at all times due to his condition, there is a gray area regarding how federal and provincial laws might interact in cases like this one.
Yeah. This is a really gray area, says the lawyer. It's only one of many, which makes even seemingly routine cases like this man's traffic stop particularly important to examine as conflicts between brand new and existing legislation at the provincial and federal levels start to emerge.
That's right. Exactly.
This speaks to all of the little nuances and perhaps difficulties, growing pains. When a previously illegal substance becomes legalized, there are a lot of little corners that need to be covered here, and this is just one of them, she said.
Yeah, and many more to go.
Wow, I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
And our next article will be the same thing. It's going to end up in the courts, and it's going to be another big battle and all that. And that's because a lawyer says renters have right to grow the medical cannabis. Absolutely.
Some landlords have enacted policies that ban smoking, vaping, and in some cases the cultivation of cannabis. And they tried doing this ahead of recreational legalization. Some Saskatchewan property management companies and smaller landlords enacted pot policies banning smoking, vaping, and cultivation of cannabis, medicinal or not. This is a direct violation of our Bill of Rights and Charter of Freedoms.
Saskatchewan's Office of Residential Tenancy says it hasn't received any complaints about those policies yet, and no one has been evicted under these policies to the office knowledge. But cases are propping up in both Saskatoon and Regina that suggest challenges to the policies are imminent.
Because of legalization, landlords and condo boards are turning their minds to the issue, and they're passing policies that in some cases don't provide for accommodation of medical patients. That was said by Trina Fraser, an Ottawa-based cannabis lawyer and partner with the Brazo Cellar Law. That reasonable access has to include the right to grow your own, she said.
Yep. Some landlords have said the reason for the blanket policy is to ensure the safety and comfort of all tenants. They also cite concerns over the possibility of property damage, issues like mold, which can arise if growers aren't careful. Don't they normally have inspections in some places once a year?
And and this is why instead of saying no, you can't, say okay, we don't have the right to tell you can't, but these are the conditions under which you have to. Get a grow tent for under $500. You got your whole system, and it's set it and forget it. It'll be there in 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks if you get the short stuff dwarf. Anyway,
that's right.
They also say they don't have time or resources to make distinctions for those that have a green card, which is their license to grow medically from Health Canada. So in other words, they want to be lazy and just say no, because that's easier.
Well, according to the lawyer, Trina Fraser, to get permission to grow cannabis for medical purposes from the federal government, if you are intending to grow in your dwelling, does not require you to get permission of the property owner. That's intentional and for a reason. The courts of this country have told the federal government time and time again that you have a duty under the charter to provide reasonable access to cannabis for medical purposes for people.
Yes. And yeah, that Bill of Rights, that Charter of Freedoms, that Bill of Rights, it says a lot. And, people really need to read that. So what is reasonable? The Office of Residential Tenancies is one option for tenants and landlords that are facing such a dispute. The Residential Tenancy Act was recently amended in conjunction with changes to cannabis laws, and landlords that can now legally enact rules that prohibit marijuana or cannabis consumption and growing on their premises. But it's up to the Residential Tenancies Office to decide if these rules can be used as a cause for eviction.
Yeah, I can see some battles coming.
Well, yeah, and, let's take it right here and let's come back. Well, no, sorry, let's carry on. Shane Moore, who's facing possible eviction from his landlord for a medicinal grow-op in his apartment in Saskatoon, a specific argument can be made based on reasonableness. He says he's been open with his landlord since he signed his first lease a few years ago about medical cannabis use. He says he showed them his license at their request. And when the landlord's new pot policy was enacted in October, he says he started receiving written and verbal warnings from the landlord, but no official eviction so far.
No, not yet. And it's going to take him thousands of dollars to relocate his grow as well. There are decisions on issues surrounding cannabis and landlords that predate the recreational cannabis legalization. Tenants and landlords could use these decisions to build their arguments. According to Ms. Johnson, the parties submitting their case would need to present their arguments and reference that precedent. According to Trina Fraser, there is little jurisprudence on this issue, either you're in your home province of Ontario or nationally. We are going to see these issues propping up across the country, she says. Which I agree.
Yeah, if a tenant or landlord is looking for immediate decision, though, it's not going to be possible. The Tenancies Office just implemented a new online system and is overcoming a backlog created as a result of that transition. And it's going to take about a month or two for the hearing to be scheduled from the time a claim is submitted. After the hearing, a decision can be appealed by either party within 30 days. Most landlords don't use lawyers in this process, and neither do tenants, though it is an option that's available to them.
Yeah, it is. It's available. All right, let's do one more story and take our second break.
Sure.
And this,
go for it.
We don't talk much about this story, about this here. We talk about the Cannabis Act. We're talking about how things are changing with the legalization. But in Alberta hemp farmers see bright future in the wake of the Cannabis Act.
Yes, this is very exciting. This will be the next Canada, said Danny Fieldberg, who grows industrial hemp on his certified organic farm outside of Medicine Hat. Once it gets going, there will be no stopping it, he says. Like canola, which was selectively bred by a team of researchers in the 70s and has grown to become a billion-dollar industry in Canada, industrial hemp is primarily grown in the three prairie provinces. Also, like canola, hemp can be used to produce a cooking oil, as well as edible seeds, protein powders, and so much more.
Yeah. For years, farmers with licenses to grow industrial hemp have been banned from harvesting any part of the crop except the seeds and stems. The leaves, flowers, and buds, the part that contained the CBD, had to be left in the fields. The change in August, when the federal government changed its regulations in advance of the new Cannabis Act, now hemp farmers are permitted to harvest the whole plant and sell it to licensed producers for the purpose of CBD extraction and sale.
This opportunity has growers like Fieldberg excited. Prior to legalization, he and his brother and father had already started a business called Altiva Inc., focusing on growing the market for hemp-based superfoods. While they were still involved in the food side, they now see a whole new line of businesses opening up for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm sure there is, because they said it only seeds and stems were able to sell, and they had to throw the rest of it on the ground. Now they can do something with it.
Crazy, eh? Well, Alberta's already the second largest producer of hemp in Canada, after Saskatchewan. In 2017, there were 45,000 acres of hemp grown in the province, out of a total of 138,000 acres Canada-wide. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, according to the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance, they said the figure is sure to grow. Since legalization, the office has received many calls from farmers with no previous history growing hemp who are interested in CBD's market potential.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of questions locally, too. Fortunately, I know how to say, I don't know. But Haney said there's still a lot of regulatory work to be done before that happens, however, but already growers are signing contracts with some of the cannabis industry's biggest players, such as Canopy Growth, which was the first cannabis company in North America to be publicly traded. He says, we're hearing reports that even in this year of experimentation, some producers have been able to generate a similar income from the sale of chaff, flowers, leaves, and buds that they have from seeds in the past, says Haney.
Yeah. The industry believes the CBD opportunity represents about $100 million in additional revenue for the hemp growers based on the number of current acres in production. But farmers face a number of hurdles in getting to that figure. For example, while hemp is relatively easy to grow to crop, it is challenging to harvest.
Well, yeah, he says, that you have to put the stalk through, and it's like running baler twine through your combine. In addition, most crops contain only 1 to 2% CBD, so seed breeding programs aimed at raising that level will be necessary if farmers are to get the most bang for their buck. And finally, there is the question of processing capacity. Currently, farmers looking to sell their harvest for the purpose of CBD extraction need to ensure that they have an advance contract lined up with one of the major cannabis companies. However, industry boosters are already trying to attract more processing facilities to Alberta.
Yeah, like if they're being forced to sell it just to the licensed producers, I guess that really narrows down to the companies that they can sell it to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that could be a bad thing too,
It can go either way. There's so much potential in the air right now. So many things, so many different avenues we could be looking at just in direct relation to cannabis. Unfortunately, everything is in the air and nothing has legs yet, except for what the government's controlling.
All right, Irene, it's time for another medication break.
I'm in.
Okay, we'll be back shortly. Meanwhile, you, our listeners, will hear some more about the U.S. coverage of Canada's first day of cannabis legalization, this time from ABC. And then we're coming back when you hear about that guy with the bag of sunshine. Yeah, Mr. Weedman. You'll be hearing more about him. You're listening to the Reefer Reporters. We are live here at lifestyleradio.net and 420radio.ca.
North of the border tonight, recreational marijuana is now legal across Canada, and it comes not without controversy. Can Americans bring some of that marijuana back over the border? ABC's Gio Benitez in Montreal tonight.
They started lining up before dawn, down the street, around the block, thousands of Canadians waiting hours to buy marijuana.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
As the day went on, the lines grew longer, Canadian flags unfurled, the country now one of only 2 in the world to legalize recreational pot.
It's pretty cool, actually. It's like coming out of a prohibition. So that's why we're here, because it's such a big moment.
Yes, there are detractors. The Canadian Medical Association Journal calls it all an uncontrolled experiment, putting money above the health of Canadians. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who campaigned on a promise to legalize, today tweeted that regulating pot means profits out of the hands of criminals, protection for our kids. It could also mean an estimated $400 million in tax revenues.
Cannabis is legal in Canada, and everybody should come to Canada and enjoy our cannabis.
Big news north of the border tonight. Gio is in Montreal for us. And Gio, a lot of people back here at home likely asking, can you bring some of that marijuana back across the border? Is that legal?
Well, David, Customs and Border Protection says absolutely not. And if they catch you with it at the border, you could be arrested. David?
Gio Benitez in Montreal tonight. Gio, thank you.
Don't forget to catch the award-winning Pace Radio Show live every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on Lifestyle Radio.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Canadays, your friendly neighborhood Campbellford head shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Let us help you grow your 4 with weekly Tuesday night gardening sessions for beginners. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. Canadays, more than just a head shop. 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Tune in to DJ Passion from the land of Ganja, the island of Jamaica, when he comes to you live every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on LifestyleRadio.net. Hi, this is Al Graham of the Pace Radio Show. Are you keeping pace, as in keeping people advocating cannabis education? If you're not, and you're a cannabis consumer, then why not? Others are working hard every day to help educate people about cannabis so you can enjoy your daily 420. Get involved and speak out. Be loud and proud, so that you can keep pace. Tune into the Pace Radio Show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to hear about people advocating cannabis education here on Lifestyle Radio.
Bring me some, 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 some. Bring me some, 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 some. Bring me some, 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 some. Bring me some, 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 some. Mr. Wee Man, bring me some weed. Bring me the greenest that I ever seen. I roll it up with Uncle Pooh papers. I'll fire it up and you can catch the vapors. Wee Man, the motor's for me.
Okay, we're back. Green Irene and I got ourselves medicated and we are ready to finish our Reefer Report. What do you think, Green Irene? Time to get back at her?
I'm right there.
We better get skedaddling at it here. So
Absolutely. Well, you know what? We're over to the states now, and here we're talking about that voters in 7 states are going to see cannabis questions on Election Day.
Okay, let's just quickly run down some.
Sure.
Okay, Colorado. They're going to amend the definition of hemp.
Yes.
It's going to go from a constitutional definition to a statutory definition. That's it.
Yeah. In Michigan, they're looking at a couple of different proposals. The first is an initiated law to authorize legal possession. And then the second one, I think, go ahead.
Yep, they would allow individuals 21 or older to purchase, possess, and use cannabis and cannabis-infused edibles and grow up to 12 plants for personal consumption. Oh, nice.
We're moving about Michigan. In North Dakota, the initiated measures that they're looking at, I just want to take a quick scroll here. Controlled substances. It's going to...
Yeah, they're going to impose a 10-ounce limit for what you can keep in your residence. You're allowed to grow 12 plants. How are you going to keep it under 12, under 10 ounces?
Well, we can see that one's not going to go through as planned. In Missouri, medical cannabis, the Missouri Constitution is amending that they allow the use of cannabis for medical purposes and create regulations and licensing or certification procedures. They're looking at imposing a 4% tax on the retail sale, and they're planning to use the funds from those taxes for healthcare services and military veterans of the Missouri Veterans Commission. So I think they're kind of going in the right direction.
Yeah. In North Dakota, they're talking about cannabis legalization, and their measure would amend the North Dakota Century Code by removing hash, cannabis, and THC from the list of Schedule I Controlled Substances Act.
Wow, there.
Yeah, right. In their state, yeah.
Yeah, and in Utah, they're again establishing state-controlled processes for allowing persons with certain illnesses to acquire and use medical cannabis, and grow up to 6 plants for personal medical use.
Ohio, they're going to have cannabis decriminalization, and the question is: shall the Dayton Revised Code of General Ordinances be amended to decriminalize specific misdemeanor cannabis and hashish offenses.
There. Wisconsin has, according to the county, several that you're in Wisconsin, there's several questions that are going to be on the ballots, including things like, should cannabis be legalized in Wisconsin for medicinal purposes and regulated in the same manner as other prescription drugs, as well as questions like, should cannabis be legalized, taxed, and regulated in the same manner as alcohol for adults 21 years or older. So depending on what county you're in Wisconsin will determine what question you're being asked, but there are a lot of questions there.
There are. There are. I'm still getting to the bottom of the list.
No. In the end, other measures, voters in a number of counties and municipalities in different states with some form of legalization will have a chance to decide on local measures, setting marijuana tax rates, or to allow or ban commercial cannabis activity. There are far too many of these measures to compile in totality or for you and I to discuss. So you should use your state or county elections website to take a look at the simple ballot before you head to the polls.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's good to see that there's it is on the ballot, and cannabis advocates should get out there and do some voting.
Yes, never mind the lip service on the back patio.
Yeah.
Get in and have your voice heard.
All right, let's head to Maine, where they plan to extend deadline for cannabis rulemaking consultants to apply.
Yes, consultants seeking to guide Maine state agencies as they craft the adult use of cannabis regulations and review the medical cannabis program now have until November 8th to turn in their applications. Yeah. Mainers in 2016 voted to allow adult use, possession and retail sales of cannabis, but sales won't become legal until agencies pass regulation and get the legislative approval.
Outgoing Governor Paul LePage twice vetoed recreational cannabis implication laws, but lawmakers finally overrode his second veto, paving the way for regulations. The people voted on this.
Yeah.
And a single person just says, I don't like it, and cancels it.
Well, I see that happen all the time, unfortunately, in politics or wherever there is a heavier wallet than somebody else's when there's opposing views. Yeah. But here's bottom line where the situation stands. David Hendrick, the spokesperson for Maine's Department of Administrative and Financial Services, recently said that rulemaking will begin once a consultant is hired. He estimates that a contract will be signed in December and the work will start in January.
Yep, they'll have until April the 30th for consultants to develop the rules required to begin adult use cannabis sales. Maine must start accepting recreational applications 30 days after regulations are adopted.
Yes. In addition to writing the regulations, recreational cannabis regulations, the consultant will draw up medical cannabis rules to permit the new dispensaries and allow caregivers to open retail outlets based on a law the Maine legislature passed earlier this year.
Yeah, it's nice for you hearing these places are allowing hashish, edibles, and stuff, and here we're still a year away from any of that.
It is, and things aren't looking too good in Mexico either. The Mexican Supreme Court strikes down marijuana prohibition.
And why is that not looking good in Mexico?
Oh, boy, did I read that
down cannabis prohibition.
Boy, did I read that wrong. My brain just did a whole what's that called when you see things backwards?
Dyslexia?
Dyslexia. Yeah, I just had a whole dyslexic moment in cognitive thinking ability there. All right, let's try that. This is exciting. Let me try that again.
Two separate court cases. Last Wednesday, the Mexico Supreme Court set binding precedent that the country's ban on consuming cannabis is unconstitutional. The move comes as the nation's incoming presidential administration has been considering legalization.
Earlier this month, designated members of the president-elect, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador's, did I say that? Future cabinet discussed legalizing cannabis with the Canadian government officials on a trip to that country, which ended prohibition of the drug this month.
Yep. The two new high court judgments follow three similar previous rulings. Under Mexican law, when chambers of the Supreme Court rule the same way 5 times or on a given subject matter, it becomes binding precedent on the nation's judges.
It also means that the government must now amend policies that contradict with the court's constitutional interpretation, namely that marijuana laws need to be reformed.
Yep. The ruling only applies personal possession and private use and cultivation in the home for such use. According to Steve Rolls, he's a policy analyst with Transformed Drug Policy Foundation. It also allows for sharing, so the situation will be somewhat similar perhaps to the give and grow schemes in Washington and Vermont, and it doesn't allow for commercial sales. Though that seems likely to follow when lawmakers act to implement the ruling, and until legislation is adopted, we will be in something of a gray area. Geez, where have we heard that before?
Yeah. In these matters, the first chamber held that the fundamental right to free development of the personality allows persons of legal age to decide, without any interference, what kind of recreational activities they wish to carry out and protect all the actions necessary to materialize that choice. Court said in a press release, as translated by Google, now it was also clarified that this right is not absolute and that the consumption of certain substances could be regulated, but the effects caused by marijuana do not justify an absolute prohibition on its consumption.
Yeah, the new president doesn't mean that it is automatically legal for people to use and grow, but it does mean that judges considering the cases of those who are caught by police must abide by the Supreme Court's ruling.
Yes. Mexico's Congress, 90 days to repeal the cannabis law that are now considered unconstitutional.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
the Wednesday rulings in cases whatever, 547 2018, 548 2018, they were first reported by the Huffington Post, apparently.
Yeah, I saw the...
Or HuffPost.
Yeah, I saw that and grabbed a hold of that. It's good to know.
Job.
Mexico's going to legalize.
Good job.
All right, on to our final story of the evening.
Across a big pond there we went.
That's right.
Over to the UK's legalization of medical cannabis. And
they're having problems.
Yeah.
Since last Thursday, medical cannabis has been legal in the UK. This means specialist doctors are now able to prescribe cannabis products for conditions where there is a proven medical benefit, potentially helping thousands of people suffering from epilepsy, MS, chronic pain, and nausea as a result of chemotherapy, among the ailments.
Yeah, this landmark change in the law occurred after several stories came to light of sick children suffering under prohibition, including Billy Caldwell, the severely epileptic 12-year-old that hit the headlines earlier this year when Home Office confiscated Canadian-bought cannabis oil that made his condition manageable. There was nationwide horror at the situation prompted by Home Secretary Javid to order a review of the law, after which it was decided that cannabis should be changed from a Schedule I drug with no medicinal value to a Schedule II, which can be prescribed.
Yeah, let's be clear, the struggle is far from over. The release is its prescription last week, and they were disappointingly restrictive. Drawn up by the Royal College of Physicians and Royal Pediatric Neurology Association, the guidelines say cannabis products can only be used as a last resort, and that patients with MS and chronic pain are unlikely to get prescriptions. In fact, the guidelines state boldly that very few people in England are likely to get a prescription for medical cannabis.
Well, this
so
kind of
you make it legal, but you're so restrictive that people that are on their deathbed are the only ones that are allowed to get it.
Yeah, it's horrifying. And, when it first started in Canada for medicinal reasons, we went through all this sort of thing, and it just takes a very loud public to speak up and defend themselves. And it looks like, as an MS Society statement said, it's likely that nothing will change in the short term for 1 in 10 people who get relief from pain and muscle spasms by using medical cannabis. We're calling for the interim guidance of prescribing medical cannabis to be urgently reviewed so that the access to treatment isn't so restricted.
Yeah. Despite this, the guidelines, the health secretary seemed to imply that doctors are being given a certain level of flexibility. Doctors need to use their clinical judgment, and having guidance to place helps. Ultimately, the need to treat an individual person and the responsibility of that falls on the shoulders of a doctor. That's what they do. Indeed, there will be no direct policy from government that limits the conditions from which medical cannabis can prescribe, which is a good thing, but geez, they really got squeezed down tight on them.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and all of this is compounded when we look at it by the fact that the UK has almost no medical professionals properly trained in this kind of medicine. Cannabis has been outlawed for so long there that doctors have never had to consider it before, nor does their medical training contain anything about its therapeutic use. The lack of knowledge among physicians means that they are even more likely to heavily rely on the prescription guidelines provided, because this is where and how they have been trained. It's plain and simple.
Yeah. Well, they say that the good news is that new guidelines are going to come out relatively soon. According to the National Institute of Clinical Experience, has been given until October 2019, so they got a year to produce full guidelines for the prescription of medical cannabis products to replace the current somewhat rushed interim guidelines. So they are going to change them, but that's a year.
True, but the struggle is not over for patients. The dam has been broken, and what seemed impossible a year ago has happened in the space of just a few months, but it's still going to take some time to thrash out all of the details. It's important to get those right when progress happens this way, little by little, and all at once.
Yeah, well, let's not take too long. Patients are waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly,
yeah.
and patients need their medication.
That's right.
It's ridiculous that this is the way it's being rolled out, but it is, and that's the way it goes. That's the way
right.
Nothing happens fast in politics.
All right, Irene, have you got a shout out so we can wrap up?
I know I don't today, Al. So it's all yours, my friend. All right. I want to say, be happy, get healthy, and stay strong.
There you go. That's our Reefer Report for November the 5th, 2018. And in closing, we'd like to say thank you for listening to our Cannabis News broadcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends. Plus, tell them that they can usually catch us here around 4:20 on Mondays. Plus, don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate.
So what are you doing? Nothing. Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.